This is PBS Reno Arts, and I'm Dave Santina. If you read Art Views on pbsreno.org, then you should know Scott Faulkner. Scott is, among other things, he's an Art Views columnist, certainly, but principal bassist of the Reno Phil, faculty director of League of American Orchestra's Essentials of Orchestra Management Seminar, which is an incredible title, and, of course, Reno Chamber Orchestra, you've been with in many capacities for many years. And also you're the director of that League of American Orchestra's Essentials Alumni Network, is correct? Yeah, so you're a busy guy. So thank you for giving us a little bit of time.
My pleasure. Good to be here.
I appreciate it. And so, yeah, you do keep us up to date on your Art Views column about what's happening locally, but also you write about many more things. Your writings encompass far more than simply reporting on the classical music scene in Northern Nevada. Some of the topics I've seen already, I was just reading through the other day, sort of preparing to talk to you. Great column about leadership. I think that is really valuable. You're promoting emerging leaders in the industry and describing how to build and maintain a good board of directors. So you're not just a music guy. You're much broader than that.
Well, life is funny that way. I've never been a specialist. I've always been a generalist who was interested in lots of different things and didn't just go down rabbit holes and stay there. So, I became executive director of the Reno Chamber Orchestra after playing in it. So I've been a musician and I've played the bass since I was in the 5th grade.
Wow.
But then I was an English Lit minor in college, and I didn't end up going to conservatory and just, really focusing on getting a big professional performing career, and always had different interests. And it just turned out here in Reno that I was the executive director of the chamber orchestra while I was playing in both of the orchestras. So I was labor and management at the same time, and a little schizophrenic at times.
I bet.
Had to remember which hat I had on.
I bet, yeah. And so, I think those of us who are outside of the lay people, the civilians, if you will, imagine, you've got to spend X number of hours a day practicing to stay sharp and to be a high-level musician, and that's a lot. So to add managerial duties on top of that seems almost overwhelming. How's that possible to do that?
Well, it's hard, and to be really honest with you, it burned me out. I was the executive director for 14 years and was playing, and so every day and every night and every weekend of my life basically was spoken for. And over time, probably it was inevitable. Probably it was just time to go. They say the shelf life of a leader is about 10 years, and I was 14. So, it was probably around time to make a change anyway, but I was fried. And so the life that I'm living now is I don't run an institution. I'm not the CEO of the orchestra or something like that. But when I was at the RCO, I was asked by the League of American Orchestras, which is it's the National Association of Orchestras, and just a great organization that's been really helpful to me. And when I was a new executive director, I took this seminar called The Essentials of Orchestra Management, and it was a 10-day boot camp of everything about running orchestras in New York City, and it was just the most important professional training that I received, really. And a few years after that, that I'd been in the job, and they asked me to come and do a session on small budget orchestras. Our orchestras here in Reno, I think the Philharmonic's annual operating budget is around $4 million. The RCO is something like 800,000, and so that's how nonprofits are often talked about, is what's your budget size, because there are similarities for organizations based on that. So, for instance, and I don't know the most recent number, the LA Phil's annual operating budget is about $130 million.
Really?
Yeah. So, it's just crazy scope and scale of these things. So I was brought in to kind of talk about the similarities and differences of big and small budget orchestras. And so I got my foot in the door. It went well, and I just kind of stayed. And so I got on the faculty permanently, and so I was there each year for the full 10 days, and then was assistant, and then a few years ago was asked to be the faculty director of this seminar. And it's just amazing. It happens at Juilliard every summer for 10 days, and we have about 30 faculty members from around the world, mostly in the country, but just leaders in the field on finance and on marketing and on artistic planning and just the whole realm of this world that we live in. And with things changing in the world so much, and with so many headwinds and, all kinds of factors, it's much less of a come in, get out your pencils, here's how you run a railroad. It's how do we even think about what we do and why do we do it?
It seems like it adds an extra layer of complexity to what's already a pretty complex job.
Absolutely, no doubt. And so to go in and have the gall to tell people how to do this, it's like, maybe not. But we have an amazing class. This summer's class had 36 students, and we had 88 applicants. So we were from all around the country. So largely sort of early career folks who some of them are at bigger orchestras, and then some executive directors of smaller orchestras, but all coming in a few career changers, that are looking to get into the field. But it's really encouraging. The people that come through this are just so driven, so smart, so energetic. And it really gives a lot of hope for some things.
Yeah. So what kind of skill set do you need to succeed in the management side versus the musician side?
That's interesting. I would say, especially if you're going to be the CEO, the executive director, you need a broad view of things because you're not in charge of one thing. You're sort of overseeing everything. Yeah. And when I took the course, my mentor, Peter Pastreich, who was a elder statesman in the field and ran the San Francisco Symphony for a long time, and he said, as orchestra managers, all we do is manage relationships. And no truer words were said.
And I think you either paraphrased or quoted him in one of your columns.
Yeah, I have written about this because this concept, it's probably true for a whole lot of fields and maybe for all of them, that really what it comes down to is relationships. And in music, it's relationships between people, it's between relationships of sound, it's all kinds of things. And so, keeping that top of mind is really important because you can be a really good technician, but if you're just a jerk who puts everybody off, it makes it really hard, especially if you have to go raise money and sell tickets and do things like that.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You may have an eccentric personality that you can sell that. Yeah. But if you're just a jerk, that's harder to sell.
It's harder to sell, and so something to keep in mind.
And one of your columns promoted and mentioned a number of the people who have come out of that program that you were really impressed by and proud of. One of whom was briefly the CEO here in Reno of the Phil, right?
Right.
That's a program that has put out quite a few successful managers.
Absolutely, yeah. And so Ignacio Barón Viela, who was here for a few months and now is the CEO of the Florida Orchestra in the Tampa-St. Petersburg area, but also right now the executive director of the Reno Chamber Orchestra, Amy Heald, is a former student as well. So it's kind of an interesting, wonderful thing to see people out in the world and some of these folks coming to Reno. So yeah,
that's got to feel good as someone who's behind the organization that's helping to generate these leaders, to have one or two or more come here. Then that justifies a little bit of the work that you're doing, and it's a good justification for going back year after year.
Absolutely, no, it really is rewarding.
So when you've got a small, we'll call it a small town. We'll call Reno a small town relative to your Tampa, St. Pete, Florida Orchestra. It makes me think about the possibility that this could happen regularly, that people could be coming through and good quality people who get an opportunity and can't help but take it. Is there any concern about losing talent to bigger markets, or this is a world I don't know very well, the world of professional musicianship. You'd look at news anchors, you look at people in broadcasting, a lot of the idea is jump from place to place, go to the bigger market, make a better living, etc. What is that like for people in the music industry?
That's interesting. In the management side, the administrative side, I would say, compared to getting a full-time job in a professional orchestra, there are very few orchestras with a big enough budget to have full-time salaried musicians. And when they do, the audition process is just mind-boggling. They'll have I don't know, call it 100 resumes, and then they're all great players, and then they'll invite 50, let's say, to the audition, and they'll come and they'll play great, and then maybe they'll hire one person. So it's just it really is so competitive and so nuts. So because of that, or we have here in Reno, some amazing players who have actually played in big orchestras, subbed, come really close on auditions, but that are in our orchestras. And so that's sort of the musical side. When you have a conductor search, usually there's 100 to 300 applicants to go through.
Okay.
So it's just nuts that way. Administrative, not so many, but finding the right mix, finding the right person, and then Reno tends to cast a spell, and I think I may have written about this too, that for me, I am just celebrating 30 years in Reno. I came here for graduate school and thought I'd be here for 2 years and never left. And actually, right after I moved here, I was renting an apartment, and my roommate that I had just met took me out for a drink, and he said, the curse of Reno is that you either stay here or end up coming back. And I said, oh, that's nice, but totally true.
Right. At the time, you did not believe that for a second.
I had no idea, and I had nothing against Reno. I just didn't
Right.
know it. And for the right person, Reno is just a great place. And for me, it really was. It allowed me to do lots of different things that I couldn't have if I'd have gone into a bigger organization and been slotted in as a musician or this or that.
Sure. I know that Reno has a reputation through at least what I hear through things like the comedy world. It's a butt of jokes to a lot of people, and has been for many years for reasons that I think are probably not really relevant these days. But I wonder about that in your world of orchestral performers. Is there a reputation for this town, or are people surprised at the quality of the work that's being done here?
The people that just don't know, they're come, and they are always pleasantly surprised. I love when soloists come to play with the orchestras, because without exception almost, they come, and I don't know if they have low expectations or they're like, oh, it's another place. It's like, wow, this is really good. And then, Reno has put some amazing people out in the world, especially musicians. A few names to drop right now.
Sure, why not?
So there's a wonderful young woman, Molly Carr, who grew up in Reno, and she's now the violist of the Juilliard String Quartet. Demetria Toppin, who's on the faculty here, the cello professor at UNR, plays with the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, and he's now, I think, on tour with them and regularly performs there. And we have a really good thing going. And so it's, hopefully, part of my columns are trying to get this secret to not be a secret, to get it out there in the world, because we really have a good thing. And, I think about it in terms of smaller places in the arts. Aspen, not terribly big. Ashland, Oregon, not terribly big, but yet they became known for these amazing, amazing arts and things. And, you look at all that we have to offer here, and it's like, why not us?
It's true. And you think of Ashland and you immediately think Shakespeare. It's almost, if you've been and you're used to hearing it, it's almost part of the name.
Exactly.
You just almost think Ashland Shakespeare Festival is the town.
Right. And
but it's
why
not.
Ashland, Oregon? They have fruit trees. And,
It's a beautiful place to visit.
Exactly.
But
so's here.
It now has that designation for so many people. And I think about that, that Reno is, for people here, it's many things.
Right.
A lot of it related to outdoor activities, and I can speak to that. Doing Wild Nevada for years, I learned about things that you can do here, and fell in love in a different way with a place. I grew up here, but didn't think anything of it because I grew up here. When you grow up in a place, you just want to go somewhere else,
right?
And then, like you said, you come back and say, oh, this is really nice. So now I get it. So I can see the appeal to someone who's already here, performing, performing as a musician, making a living, maybe teaching. I assume that still most of the, if not all of the performers in the Phil and the chamber orchestra are either teaching on the side or doing other work at the same time.
They do other things or play in other orchestras. So they are what's known as per-service orchestras. So they get paid by the rehearsal or the concert, which is great. But there's not weekly work here. So for many of the musicians, they will commute. There's something called the Freeway Philharmonic. So a lot of musicians will play, kind of a loop in Northern California, Reno. And so that's one way. Other ones are music teachers, insurance sales. So people
whatever they need,
figure that out. So they have sort of more well-rounded. I won't say more well-rounded lives, but sort of. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you yourself are a tremendous writer. You keep getting asked to write things. When reading your column, I saw where you've been asked to write a eulogy, you've been asked to write a profile for another musician, and I think you're a good writer, obviously, or you wouldn't be doing art views, and you've been doing that column even before PBS Reno for years. So is that something that just developed? Were you always a writer? Was it how did that happen?
Well, I always liked that. My mother loved to write and kept journals, and so that was something that we shared. And I mentioned I was an English lit minor in college, and so words and writing have always come naturally to me. And interestingly, and a lot of people might be surprised by this, to play in an orchestra is to be part of an amazing machine that's kind of happening. So although it's music, it's not as creative as you might think. A soloist in a rock band or a jazz combo might get out there and be able to play and create and be completely creative with their music. If you're in an orchestra, you need to march in step with exactly what's on the page. And so there are sort of moments for creativity, but my most creative outlet really is writing. It's not playing in the orchestras.
Okay. Now, and you keep a journal regularly?
Not as over the years, yes and no, not as much. I mean, that was something that inspired, that my mom did. And so that was nice. But no, the writing that I do largely is for art views.
Okay. Well, we appreciate it because it's fun to read. I skimmed through a whole bunch. I read quite a few in preparing to talk to you, and just the breadth and depth of the subject matter you cover is impressive. I mentioned at the beginning, you talk about leadership skills. That's not necessarily what I would have expected reading. Well, this is the arts column, and it's going to be about classical music, and you're telling us all about leadership skills and running through examples of different skills that are important to have. And I think that's really impressive, and also it encourages me to come back and read more, because perhaps I'm not thinking that I want to read something today about classical music. It doesn't matter. Scott's column's going to be about whatever Scott's feeling like he wants to write about.
A little bit. That's kind of how my brain works too. So
and I loved it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and certainly that kind of comes from the compartment that is my orchestra management teacher side.
Right.
This summer at Essentials I co-taught a session on leadership. So those kinds of things are often top of mind for me. And then sometimes it's very much about the musical side of things, and other times it's commercials and trying to get the word out for concerts and performances that we have, coming up in town. And,
Yeah. You always do a seasonal preview, a sort of spring, summer. Here's some things that are coming up.
Often do that,
and I think that's a tremendous service, because not everyone has the wherewithal to go find that information, and just to have it suggested is really helpful.
Sadly, that coverage in some of the local media has gone away, and that's unfortunate, I think.
Yeah, so lucky we have you to help us.
Well, thanks.
I appreciate that. Also, sometimes you'll get into a detail about performance that I find fascinating. Like, you wrote a primer essentially on how bowing works.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of us who are casual fans, I'll say, who love to come and watch performances, to listen, and I've always wondered things that maybe don't come to mind until you're in the moment. Like, how is it that they all have the bow in the same direction at the same time? That's fascinating. And you describe not just how that's done, but the value of an up versus a down, and the different sound quality, and the way that that you've arranged the music the bowing, so that when you really need to hit a hard, strong note, you've got to be pulling down, because that's where you naturally have the weight. And I thought, this is incredible. That's valuable to me, because it's like, as someone who likes to watch sporting events, I appreciate a good analyst who can explain to me the way the game is played, so that I can appreciate more what I'm seeing, and I can get into it more. Same thing with what you're doing.
Oh, thanks. I really appreciate that. And when I came here as a grad student, I taught music appreciation, and I found that really suited me, because there's a bit of a performance element, but there's also a real joy for me in talking to folks who are new to it, and just trying to break things down and give them an entry point into this world.
Yeah, well, you're doing a great job, and I wish I had someone to engage me like this when I was playing piano as a kid and feeling forced
Yep,
and
yep.
squeezed and just like, oh, I don't want to do this today. But, it's funny how I remember even then, the music I liked playing was the popular music that we'd get sheet music for, the fun stuff that was, instead of the classical piece that was the proper thing to learn in the order of things with my teacher. And I wish that in looking back, that had been flipped, that it was more encouraging that I play something I enjoy, just so I could enjoy playing.
Absolutely.
And it was a place of joyfulness instead of drudgery.
And that can come either from popular music or classical music. And I think classical music has really done itself a disservice with the sort of stigma and airs and, properness about it. It usually just comes from insecurity, but like it's great music. It's really powerful, and some kids are drawn to both things. And so I think that if we can break down those kinds of unnecessary barriers and just say to people, you don't have to be educated, you don't have to be rich, you don't have to be white, you don't have to be a lot of things. You can just check this out and see if it speaks to you.
Right, and you don't have to follow strict etiquette all the time either. I know that there's the modern take has been, between movements, you sit silently, you don't clap,
don't applaud,
and apparently, I didn't know until recently. I think I learned this. I'll promote another PBS Reno product from a few years ago, Classical Tahoe. We did a series of Classical Tahoe performances, and one of the conductors said, "There's no reason why you can't show appreciation if you want to in between movements."
Right.
That's a modern sort of conceit. Back in the day, people would applaud randomly or whenever they felt like it, and so go ahead. And it was a moment of exhilaration. It was like, oh, freedom! You can actually appreciate this incredible music right after you've been moved by it.
Right. No, exactly. And some things, some movements are sort of quiet and delicate, and so it makes sense to not to break the moment. But then other ones, it's just crazy not to. I mean, they whip you into a frenzy. It's like, oh, I must not clap because that's not the right thing to do. It's like, that's ridiculous. And, there's a letter that Mozart wrote to his father, and he said, I just finished this piece, and I wrote this one movement, and it's so good, I think they're going to ask to play it again. Like the audience will have an instant encore right there. and that's how it used to be. And there are musicologists who have studied this to death. But, I think as the U.S. was trying to, as a young country, be something cultural, there was a perception, oh, this is how we must do it. And so we layered on a lot of unnecessary things. And when I play a concert, still people often in an orchestra concert don't clap between movements generally. But if I hear it, I think, would someone please go, shake that person's hand, because it means it's a new audience member. They just didn't know. And so that's a new person. And so if they get a scowl from a fellow audience member or are shushed, like, why would you want to come back if you were treated that way? They should be, given a free ticket and a coupon for a drink,
Right, yeah. I think that's great. A T-shirt. I clapped between movements.
I'm a first timer here, and we really need to be more welcoming in that way, and in lots of ways, because our field hasn't done well at including the broader community, frankly.
Right, that's true. Yeah, I can see it.
And this is just a piece of that. Yeah.
Right. Well, I think I appreciate when conductors will speak to the crowd before, during, after performance and encourage things like that, sort of debunk some of those assumptions. And, I think, I spent a lot of time with Laura Jackson from the Reno Phil, because we did the documentary a few years ago on the Phil during the 50th anniversary year. Right. You and Laura, Tim Young, big parts of that. And so we got to spend a lot of time together. And I remember thinking, these are people who love what they do and want to share it and want everyone to be engaged in it, and in a way that is not following a set rule about how to enjoy it. It's just, come and be with us and have fun. And we love it, and we're having a good time. And she is certainly someone who is not, does not hold her nose up. Right. Very approachable, engaging, fun. And I think that the more of that you get, the better chance you have of drawing in more new audience members if it's adopted by the organizations, say, hey,
absolutely,
come have fun with us.
Yeah, that has to be part of the culture. And I'm really pleased that more and more throughout the country, really that is happening. I mean, the days of the sort of, stoic maestro descending from on high with the musical truth,
right?
Those days are kind of gone, fortunately.
Along with the crazy hair.
Yeah. I mean, there's still some crazy hair.
Stereotypical crazy hair.
I'm not the one to ask about that. Yeah.
You mentioned you playing since the 5th grade. Have you? Did you have a musical family, or were you the outlier?
Well, that's an interesting question, and the answer is sort of. So, my mom and dad were not musical to speak of. My mom really liked music. My dad played the radio. He worked for the Forest Service for 60 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So an amazing guy, but a big gift he gave me. He didn't really understand what I did, but he was supportive of me and was proud of me.
That's great.
And that meant a lot. But my mother. I have to tell the whole family story since you asked.
Sure.
So her parents were 30 years apart in age. My grandfather was 60 and my grandma was 30 when my mom was born. And
I'm shaking my head.
No,
here
it's
thinking
amazing.
About that.
So I'm 55 years old and my grandfather was born in 1876.
Unreal.
Yeah, no, it's crazy.
Oh.
Yeah, and he was a superintendent of a coal mine in central Montana at the turn of the 20th century.
Right.
And his first wife didn't want her sons to be coal miners, and so she got them music lessons. And so my uncles became professional musicians, and they formed a band called the Fletcher Brothers Orchestra and toured around, and they ended up not being themselves famous in jazz history, but touching up against it. So my uncle Chris was Bix Beiderbecke's roommate in the Gene Goldcat Orchestra, and my uncle Bill was the lead trombonist and de facto music director on the Jack Benny Show in the Phil Harris Orchestra.
Wow. All right.
And my uncle Stan was a bass player, and he actually played with Gene Krupa in 1935, right before Krupa went with Benny Goodman.
So many names.
So I have a lot of family names to drop, but Stan was the bass player, and I had a relationship with. He was a nice old man that lived in Hollywood, and I was in the 5th grade starting the instrument and didn't really know, but we would talk on the phone sometimes. And when I graduated from high school, he gave me his instrument. And so he bought this bass in 1935 during the Depression for $500, and it was made in 1735.
Oh, wow.
And so I have this amazing instrument that's also a family heirloom, and so I think about it and use it every day. And that's the instrument that I play. So I started playing, went through sort of standard elementary, junior high, school orchestras and things. I played in the Spokane Junior Symphony, which is now celebrating its 75th anniversary. I grew up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, in the panhandle of Idaho. And so then I went to Pacific Lutheran University, which is a liberal arts school, and it was a place where I could study music and English and
all the things.
Various things. Then I came to Reno for grad school, and now here we are.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's a fairly linear path, and then and because of music, you've been able to travel, I'm sure, to many places.
Yeah, and I'm not out on the road as such. I've gone to festivals, and especially regionally have played around a bit, but I've been really fortunate to get to play music in Reno, and got involved with the orchestras shortly after I came, and have just had great opportunities. I married into a legendary musical family. So my wife is Andrea Lenz, of the Lenz family, for people who know what that is. And I'm really proud of my family, and I love them, and it's just a pleasure and a privilege to be a part of that group. And people always ask, do you get together and play? It's like, no, because we get together all the other nights at rehearsal. So when we get together, it's usually not to play.
Everything but.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And what do you do on your day off?
Yeah.
Do you do your job? No.
Well, exactly. And for musicians, the words work and play are synonyms.
Right. Oh,
so,
that's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a real blurry line of when you are or aren't working. So yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah. Oh, so much. Okay. Now this is the killer. We've already gone up half an hour, and I could keep going forever. We have to come back and do more.
Okay. Great.
Let's do it again. One thing I'll ask, just because it seems like an annual event that I enjoy, and I think a lot of people in the community enjoy, are the holiday events. And so at this point, I presume that we'll still be having a spirit of the season with the Phil and a chamber orchestra festival.
Yeah.
A chamber music festival at the end of December, right?
Yeah. So December is kind of music month, and there's, in my world, the three big anchors. So it starts with Spirit of the Season, which is an amazing show that just gets bigger and bigger and more performances, and a real holiday tradition in town with the Phil. And very often, I think usually with lots of local collaboration, and it's a wonderful way to kick off the holidays. And then a week or two later, AVA Ballet Theater and the Phil provides the orchestra for the Nutcracker. Yep. So we play Nutcracker every year, and it's a great tradition to get to go and to do that. And then the last week of the year, the Nevada Chamber Music Festival happens, and it's one of the great chamber music festivals of the world. I'm really proud. That's one of the things that started when I was executive director of the Chamber Orchestra. Theodore Kuchar, who was the music director at the time, he had run a big chamber music festival in Australia, and when he came, people talked and said, could we do this here? He said, yes, if you do it the week between Christmas and New Year's, because nobody's working that week. And so we would bring in lots of folks, lots of them at that time from big orchestras that had the week off and wanted to come, but just amazing combination of the best players from around the world and some of our local best. And it's just a really special week of small group, intimate music making at a really, really high level, and something that is I've been really fortunate to get to play in and to run, and it's kind of my baby, and now my baby's 20 years old, so it's really a very cool and special thing for me.
Tremendous. So the triple crown of holiday events.
Yeah. And then there's lots of other things, and apologies to all my friends and colleagues who are doing other choral concerts and performances and this and that, but those are the ones that I'm involved with.
Great. Well, I encourage everyone to go to all three if they can, because I've enjoyed them all in the past and like to go as often as possible. It's just one of the special times of year for music in this area.
Yeah,
so worth a mention. All right, so let me get you out of here, Scott. Thank you so much for the time. Scott Faulkner. Read Scott on Art Views on pbsreno.org. Also, of course, watch Artifacts on the PBS Reno via our YouTube channel, or by broadcast or live stream on pbsreno.org or the PBS app. Also, if you have a question or suggestion about PBS Reno Arts, or maybe a comment, send them to me at podcasts@pbsreno.org. I really would appreciate any feedback that you can share. We really do like to know what you think. So this is Dave Santina for PBS Reno Arts. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.